Good afternoon. 90.5 The Night. Jeff Raspe here with you. And I would like to welcome to our airwaves Mr. Tash Neal. How
Yeah,
are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me
Oh,
today.
my pleasure, my pleasure. The new album, Charge It to the Game, is fantastic. And I know that there's kind of a long, difficult backstory to it, which we should mention, but I know it's your least favorite thing to talk about. So I don't know if we should spend a lot of time talking about it, but
I love talking about
okay,
it.
okay, okay.
Yeah,
But 8 or 9 years ago, you got what? Like, what was it? You were in a cab,
yeah.
and somebody was
Basically,
somebody was
yeah,
drag racing, and I presume the drag racer lost control.
yeah. I mean, obviously, I don't remember anything about the impact. I
Yeah,
remember the night. It's fun. I mean, I'm lucky in that way, but well, I'm lucky in a lot of ways.
yeah,
When you rephrase that, but yeah, don't remember the impact, but they were going. I mean, I saw the aftermath because there's footage of it. There's some footage in the video for the song. All I see
yeah,
is that you can see the actual cab and how
yeah.
bad it
Which I
was.
wanted to do. I'll bring up
Yeah,
that bit later. Yeah,
but yeah, so they basically it was a normal Tuesday night. It was actually pretty chill considering the fun I was having at the time. Uh, Me and my buddy Redford were at his studio and just listening to music and relatively early, we hailed the yellow cab and we got sideswiped on Bleecker and Thompson downtown, which is a very, popular. I mean, accidents don't really happen
yeah.
in that residential of a place, especially like 100 something miles per hour kind of deal. So, you know, after the impact, there was like 100 people on the street, and but yeah, they had to use the jaws of life, take me out. My eye was kind of popping out of its socket. So when they took me, I mean, I was dead pretty
You were
much.
out. Yeah.
I was dead. And they knew that they had to operate on the brain because when the eye pops out, they knew that the blood, because of the impact, is crushing my brain. So they put me in in a coma. They basically put me in a medically induced coma, and the word was that it wasn't looking good if I made it. You know, so it wasn't. It was a big if. The cops would show up and just check if I was going to make it or not, because if I didn't, it'd be a different crime.
Right. It changes the charge. Yeah.
Right. So, which is a weird reality to exist in. So I'm in this coma. I get up, and I my family was around me, and if I lived, I wasn't supposed to be able to walk or talk or anything like that. I mean, I have severe brain damage. So when I woke up and could remember my family and how to speak, I distinctly remember, like, my first memory is seeing the doctor in the back just become ghost white pale and just kind of like sneak back. And mind you, I didn't know what had happened. And
Yeah,
and so I did
actually, yeah, you're probably still wondering, why am I lying down? Why is everybody around
complete.
me?
It
Yeah,
was truly like the Twilight. That whole week was like the Twilight Zone because I was very confused. Obviously, how you're not confused? How did I get here? One, two. You're not asking for a mirror, but you're like, I don't know what I look like, right? So I'm looking at everybody, and everyone's like happy and they're crying, and I'm like, okay, this is easy work for me. Like, everyone's happy. All I did was wake up. I'm thinking, it's a Wednesday, whatever. I didn't even know what day it was. You know, so when I see the doctor kind of, what I realized was the doctor kind of like looked scared. I was like, something must have happened. Something very weird must have gone down. But I still didn't. They don't tell you all that.
yeah,
And the funny thing was, very Twilight Zone was, if you look at old pictures of the souls, London souls, shaved or uh, whatever the case. And I get into walk into the bathroom, which I shouldn't have done. And I turn around, and it was Twilight Zone because there was a mirror in the bathroom.
hmm,
And I look in the mirror, and for the first time, I've got a full beard, right? And half of my hair is gone. My skull's sucking in because I had to take half of it out. So I looked in the mirror and I just said, whoa, you know. who is this dude and what happened? And I and I immediately said, you know what, I'm going back to bed. I'm gonna deal with this in the morning. You know, we'll figure it out later. But this is weird. But that was the beginning of it.
Well, because that's got to be so strange. Because you at that point still don't know what happened,
Nah,
and I mean that is total Twilight Zone. Yeah,
completely. Yeah, it's a funny scene. I mean, it would have been funny had it not been so surreal. You know what I mean?
right.
Like,
And I was gonna say, I mean, the the way you're talking about it now, I mean, and I get it, it's 8 or 9 years later, so you've had a lot of time to absorb it and get right with it. The fact that you find some humor in it is amazing.
oh, well, I
And
was laughing that summer. I really was. I mean, I kind of, you know, I kind of didn't have more serious moments till later on. But I was, because I was so happy to be alive. Like once I realized what had happened, I was just like, let's go. Like
yeah,
let's do it.
yeah,
Um,
and I didn't even realize because I watched your new video that has some of the scene
mhm.
in it, and I couldn't place where it was. I figured it was, maybe somewhere further up. I didn't realize it was, what'd you say, Bleecker
Bleecker and Broadway.
and
It's
Bro? Oh my
literally in the heart
God.
of downtown.
Yeah. I mean, so was nobody on the sidewalk or street hit?
I mean, thank God, because after the impact, I mean, you could see, because I've seen pictures, um, it had someone been walking down that street, because the drag racer car, like after it hit the cab, we were stuck in the middle of the road. They just hit
Yeah.
the block, the city block. So thankfully, no one would happen to be there at that
Wow.
time. But as soon as that impact hit, everybody heard it. So people were surrounding the street. You see it in the video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's amazing in and of itself, let
Yeah.
alone you surviving, you getting, your your faculties back together.
Yeah.
Because that's actually, I mean, and this is something that I think is mentioned every time you have a conversation about it. You asked your dad to hand you your guitar, and because, as you said, you do literally have brain damage,
Yeah.
so you might not have even. I mean, if it was bad enough, you might not have even recognized the guitar.
Oh, not at all. You know, certainly, I mean, even though people were happy that I could speak and remember who, people were, I still hadn't touched an instrument. I hadn't even walked yet,
Yeah,
really. So, and with severe brain damage, you don't know how that's going to affect any of your faculties at the time. So at that moment, I'd been kind of, I was on propofol. That was my heavy anesthesia. So it took a couple of days to get off of that. And when I kind of had it together, that day specifically, I kind of just motioned over. I wasn't talking too much. I kind of
hmm
motioned over for the guitar. My dad happened, and he was still alive at this time. And I motioned over for it. And obviously, physically, I was forever changed because half of my skull was taken out. My brain chemistry is different. Uh, and I felt that, even though I tried to be humorous at the time or tried to keep my spirit upbeat, I definitely felt uh, injured, you
yeah.
know. But when I played the guitar, I played three chords, and I just
All you need for
immediately,
rock and roll.
really, yeah. And literally, I just played those three, and I gave it back, and that was like, okay, I felt connected to whoever I was before, because I know that coma period is really it's quite the break, if you will. It's
Yeah.
quite the coma. It's quite the period, the end of a chapter, the beginning of another. Um, so because you lose a week of time. Not only that, you're physically different.
Right. And to
But
say
yeah,
nothing of the physical recovery part of it, and
oh yeah,
yeah, all that kind of stuff. So um, that must. I mean, even though you were still in a hospital bed and you were still really beat up,
mhm.
it it must have really, in a way, put your mind at ease that, oh, okay, I can still do this.
Oh yeah, it really did. um, I mean, after feeling like connected, I wanted to make sure I was good and proficient, right? Because I'd seen videos of like soloing, and I was like, hey, this is what you do, and I was like, oh, okay, great. Let me see if I can do
Oh,
that.
really? So people were showing you London Souls videos.
Well, yeah, well, it was a nice reminder, and I also had just finished the album Here Come the Girls, so I'd forgotten that we'd made that
Oh, wow.
because I was in a coma. I didn't. And hearing that was actually very helpful. I was very hyped about it. I was very excited because it's like hearing the music for the first time that you just recorded. It's like, oh, great, you can put this out. I lived for this. So that was pretty sweet to have that. But yeah, after I got out of the hospital, I remember distinctly being recovering at the house and picking up the electric for the first time because you don't want to lift things in that period that are too heavy. You really have to give your body time to rest and recover. So obviously, playing a Gibson 335 is a bit of a heavier instrument. When the first guitar I played was a nylon string, acoustic. So I'm at the house and I'm trying to remember the song "Country Road," which is on the first London Souls album, and I was like, if I can remember these words, and I could. And then it got
Oh,
to the
wow.
solo part and I could solo. And I was like, yes, we're in business, And I put the guitar down and went back to bed,
That's pretty amazing. And that must have been, I mean, first of all, that obviously was great news to all your family and friends, but to your doctors as
Oh, yeah.
well.
Oh, man. I mean, the wild thing about that is, I got on tour pretty quickly after that whole thing. And I had my plate put in when my skull was
Mhm.
missing 3 months after the accident. Maybe
Okay.
4 months after that surgery, I'm on the road again, like fully. And one of the stops on tour, I'm playing somewhere in South Carolina, and who shows up but one of my brain surgeons. And this is not like a fancy theater. This is like a bar, like a dive bar, like a brain surgeon. This should not be, yeah. And this guy comes through, like, it's very fancy. And I'm like, and I was like, I know you, And he's like, oh man, like, I'm like, what are you doing here? And he very sincerely looked me in the eye and goes, so how are you doing that after the show? And I was like, I'm asking you that, sir.
You
You're the,
tell me.
you did that to me. Come on. So it meant a lot to me that one, he cared enough to check on me, but two, didn't lose that same energy from when he was freaked out at first when I woke up, because it's a miracle. I wasn't, when science and all these signs are telling you one thing and you kind of beat all that, you beat all those odds. Even the doctors are kind of like, whoa.
Yeah, sometimes it's not us.
Yeah, sometimes, and obviously they did a fantastic job. I'm forever indebted and grateful uh, for their talents. But of course, I think admittedly they would say there was a little extra something. Not me,
Yeah.
getting around that.
Lying on the ground while wiping handkerchiefs as slowly cross your face. Thinking in your mind there must be some way to get out of this place. Soon you're gonna find the loneliness you sought was already there. So take a bow, milk a cow. It's funny how life ain't always fair. is better done than time left alone. 'Cause now I know the difference between the doggy treat and the doggy bone. So that the path you chose is better than the fork left in the road. So you find what was mine, the only crime is not paying the toll. It seems that I've always been lying. Words but I never wanted to. It seems that the sun isn't shining. Maybe now it's catching up to you. Maybe now, maybe now. Maybe now, maybe now. It seems that I've always been lying. Words but I never wanted to. It seems that the sun isn't shining. Maybe now it's catching up to you. It seems that I've always been lying. The words but I never wanted to. It seems that the sun isn't shining. Maybe now it's catching up to you. Maybe now it's catching up to you.
Yeah, I mean, and I tend to say it a lot. Like I'll hashtag almost everything I post music related with hashtag music saves.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that's literally my life.
Yep.
Literally. You know, I got my energy back playing music. You know, I got my physical stamina back because music drove that.
Yeah.
I got out of the hospital in a week after, you know.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. So it was 1 week was the coma, and the second week was learning to walk again, and I was out.
Wow.
I really wanted to get back to music. You know, I had a tour book that summer.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't tell me I wasn't going to play. You really couldn't, you know. Without music, I could have been upset, you know, sitting in a chair, you know, anything.
Yeah. So I guess, I'm not sure anyone would have expected you to end up on tour so soon.
Oh, no.
But at least in your head, thinking, I've got to go on tour. Pushed it.
That was always the plan in my head. And it happened, you know?
Yeah. So that's amazing. Tash Neal from the London Souls is our guest today here at 90.5 The Night. He's got a brand new solo album called Charge It to the Game. I probably should mention first, obviously it's not the first question because we've done several minutes now, but is London Souls still a thing?
I mean, yeah, I mean, as long as me and Chris are still alive, it's a thing. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, cool.
As the band, you know, we speak very, very frequently. That's my brother, you know.
Cool. Good.
Speak brothers.
Yeah, because part of my thinking when I saw the new solo album, I had not yet realized the whole backstory of the solo album. And it's funny because normally I would have asked a solo artist who is also concurrently in a band, what about these songs told you it was not a band song and it should be a solo song or a solo album? And I think in your case, the answer is the most obvious it's ever been.
Yeah, I mean, and then thankfully Chris was about that too. I think when he knew how personal, because he was there, you know, he was one of my first, you know, hangs that I had coming out of a coma. I can't tell you how important that is. You know, first was my brother, my actual brother, and then Chris, you know. So having been through that with me and going through the songs, it was like, yeah, man, you know, because his songs were becoming as well more personal.
Mm-hmm.
And because he was always a songwriter, he inspired me to kind of become a better songwriter. You know, he was like who I looked up to when we started playing together. Which is funny because we were like the same age, but he's like a couple of years, not a couple of years, couple of months older. So when you're like a teenager, you're like, oh man, you know, this guy is a wise sage, you know, some kind of older monk, you know. And I still feel that way, which is funny because we've been the same age.
Well, that's cool. That's I just wanted to get that out of the way for London Souls fans out there.
Oh, you know, yeah,
But
we got some stuff. I hope to put out soon that we both are really proud of. Some unreleased stuff that we've been looking forward to. So London Souls fans, I'm very, very excited for them to hear that.
So this new album, Charge It to the Game, which seemed like an odd phrase to me until I think I read you explain what the phrase meant, at least to you. And now I'm like, okay, I get it. Yeah.
You know,
which is pretty much, I mean, it's maybe a philosophy we should all adopt. Like, regardless of what, like, perhaps in the last year you got sick and, you know, fingers crossed you got over it, or you get hit by a car, or,
well,
there you
go.
Stuff happens. You just chalk it up to, well, that's my life.
You just, what was it? Charge it to the game. That's right. That's right. What's funny is the album had a few titles, right? Or ideas. And you know, I had that song, and it's one of the few songs, like if I'm writing a song, I rarely am thinking of the title or like
oh really?
Oh yeah, no. I try to have it very much like in the moment or whatever comes out. I don't want it to be too formulaic or like too academic or too, you know.
Do you do words or music first? Or does it all come?
If it comes at the same time, it's better.
Yeah.
But you obviously refine the verses. You know, if you get a strong hook, great. But you still have to refine the choruses, maybe get the pre-chorus a little tighter. But Charge to the Game was a song where like I remember sitting in the room and I was thinking about, man, Charge to the Game. I was just thinking about the phrase. I was like, man, that needs to, and I had my guitar. I wasn't thinking about it before having the guitar. It just happened in that moment, and that riff immediately came out of the song, and I was like, yes. Started with the verses, and when the album was done, and then it became clear that it was really all the songs were kind of tracing that story and that the you know how personal it was to me. It all cumulates and like, listen, man, you gotta charge it to the game. You know, things happen in life. You're blessed and you take a fall. You know, but you gotta charge it to the game. It's almost Zen in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. Which so once I wrapped my head around what your thinking was for it, I was like, yeah, okay.
Makes sense.
Which not for nothing. I mean, like you said earlier, you went through probably, you know, the most traumatic thing anyone could go through and survive. You could have gotten nothing but depressed. You could have gotten hooked on, you know, 15 different painkillers. But you know, you're just like, use the cards I was dealt. Charge it to the game.
You know, that's real. I mean, not just listen. I wish I was perfect. You know, I mean, certainly there were days when I was wilding or living too fast, because there is a period.
Yeah.
You survive that you're like it's ecstatic to be alive, and that
the whole concept of, okay, I'm on borrowed time now.
Right.
Let's go.
it becomes difficult to balance that.
Yeah.
You know, because the other way is, oh, I can't leave the house, so I'll just be hit I'll be dead every second. Or screw it, there's no tomorrow, let's just go for it, you know, which can be fun. But thankfully,
usually is for a while.
Yeah, but thankfully I'm still here and you know, got that balance, you know, eventually. But it was a process, you know. But thankfully I had my faculties to do it. You know, I shouldn't even been walking, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, who knows what state you could be in if you know, if you hadn't had all of those things, family, friends, doctors, um, the light at the end of the tunnel of I got to go on tour.
Yeah, exactly. I often go back to the perfect lining up of, like you said, like if I didn't have that familial support, I could have woken up and not had any faces around
Yeah,
me, you know? Um, so I'm really fortunate. I think about that a lot.
cool. Tash Neal. It also occurred to me, 90.5 The Night is here on the Jersey Shore, and I was at one point going to say, welcome to 90.5 The Night here on the Jersey Shore, and I was like, wait a minute, last few years, you've been down here a good bunch
You're
of
darn
times.
right. I
Yeah.
love Jersey, man. I love Jersey.
Hanging out. In fact, I think there was a night that you and I and a whole bunch of other folks were hanging out at Danny Clinch's Transparent Gallery.
That's right. That is exactly it. Yeah, which is a very, very important place in my heart.
Yeah, yeah. I don't even remember the reason we were all there, but like, I have this vision of Joseph Arthur was there
Oh,
too. I think. Yeah.
yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
It was just. I
what
mean,
the joke.
it was one of those late night jams at
Yeah,
Transparent.
favorite.
So in a sense, it's welcome back to the Jersey Shore,
I
although you're in
yeah,
New York. But
I can't wait to play in person again for folks in Jersey. Matter of fact, the last gig that I had before everything got shut down was to be playing with Jersey's very own Rachel Emmett Bobkin. Shout out to Rachel
hmm
Bobkin.
hmm
And literally that weekend I had my hotel book, me and my girl were ready to go, and I get the call, it's like, no, the world's shutting down. Once in a 100-year pandemic. And I said, listen, charge it to the game. Okay, all right.
what are you gonna do? The
What are
whole
you gonna
world
do?
shut down. So
I'm still alive. Okay.
yeah.
We're out here. So it's gonna be all right.
So it's funny we keep saying "Charge It to the Game." That is the name of the new solo album from Tash Neal. And we here at 90.5 The Night for the last few weeks have been playing "Something Ain't Right." And actually, over the last couple of weeks, I do a Tuesday night new music show called Fresh Tracks, um, and I've started to play "All I See Is Blood" as well, which, eh, in listening to the album, which by the way is fantastic,
Thank you so much.
and there's so much in it. I love the fact that and I guess this comes from the type of guitar player you are. There's these great big power chords, and there's some funk and soul and R&B, and but in listening to the like again, once I wrapped my head around the back story of the album, the kind of the only song that seems to be very literal is "All I See Is Blood." Like you very poetically handled everything that happened, the crash and the aftermath in the other songs, where it's not, there's no song that says drag racer came down Broadway and that kind of thing.
I don't write songs like that.
Yeah.
That's too much.
But "All I See Is Blood," I think, is the one that seems to be the most literal, although there is poetic license in it. Because I can only imagine how much, not that you actually saw it because you were knocked out cold,
Yeah,
but there had to have been a whole lot of blood on that corner.
and you're right, because it is essentially the most literal. I got to go back to writing it because I remember the fun thing about this record is post having brain damage is being able to remember, actually
Yeah.
writing songs is like great. That's a win. But I remember sitting in the room and, I don't like to be in an upset place, but of course you're going to be angry. When you think about it, these folks almost killed you.
Especially it'd be one thing if it was, an understandable, legitimate accident.
Oh yeah.
this was stupidity.
Stupidity at its height. I mean, it was malicious
Yeah.
stupidity, because if anything happened at that speed, someone's dying,
Yeah.
and that someone was almost me. So when
And
you are,
having spent a number of times, nights on that corner and in that neighborhood,
oh yeah,
what makes you think that's the proper place to do it?
it was egregious, and but yeah, I mean, especially listen, there were times when I was missing half of my skull because my brain was swollen
Yeah.
because of the injury as well, and they can't just put they don't want to crush your brain with a plate, so they have
Just
to
put a
wait
plate
for that
back in. Yeah.
right, so they have to wait till that swelling goes down. So I had to spend time without half of my skull, which was painful. um, there's a lot of things that go with that, movements and
Mhm.
if you're in a car, bumps, the pain is a lot. So you go, well, why am I going through this pain? What happened? And of course you think, well, who did this? And you're upset. But rather than, try to, you know, take the law into my own hands, quote unquote, I'm able to write songs, right? So to your earlier point, I try not to be a not conscious, but a pre-conscious songwriter, in the sense that, well, let me overthink this and go and I'm going to write about drag racing, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to write a drag racer song. Um, but I was able to mine the truth in the sense that my first experience waking up, not only was I seeing blood because I was angry at people for the pain they caused my family, myself physically, but I was seeing in my eye what I thought was an eyelash. And this was very much a gaslight situation for me because I'm rubbing my eye and I got doctors, I'm in the hospital. But it was the least of my problems. When you really, I had a list of problems at that time. And, having this thing in my eye didn't even crack the top five.
Yeah.
At all. And it was funny because you're missing the skull, you've got, I had issues, but about a month later, you see the eye doctor because this thing wasn't going away. And I knew I wasn't seeing eyelashes before
Yeah.
the accident, from what I could remember. And he goes, well, there's blood there. And I said, of course there is, great. And I said, well, what do we do about this? And he goes, listen, do you really want to have surgery again? I said, okay, fine. Fair enough, doc. And he said, maybe it would go away. It's still with me today. I still see
Really?
blood. Oh yeah, I see blood all the time.
Wow.
But it was a handy metaphor with the song. Because I'm sitting in the room with the guitar, same one, the first guitar I played, which is guitar I write most of my songs. I got it over there. And drop D, I'm in drop D, which can be angry if you play the guitar. Everyone knows this. And that riff immediately came out. There was no shedding, there was no workshopping. That was the riff. And then I thought in my head, all I see is blood. And then I came up with the verse after that. That song was probably one of the fastest songs on the album for sure.
Really?
That day, I had the bridge together saying things, so fast to say we love you. They all say we always knew you, but you don't know you. Do you know yourself kind of thing? Trying to get that Bowie kind of, you have a hard riff, but then that middle part with the piano, trying to get that vibe different of gratitude and what's going on. And then hit the solo. We've got a car crash sound in the solo, sirens. Try to make it very, very real for the folks because that was the feeling,
Yeah, and those sound effects weren't actually what I meant by this is the most literal song about the crash. But
you gotta listen. I'm not literal lyrically, but I like sonically sometimes to be very literal. Musically.
Yeah, that the whole album, I think, is one of those albums where now you've released a couple of things as singles, or at least video singles.
Yeah.
But I think it's an album that actually is an album. And not just because it's essentially thematically about, one event
Mhm.
and its aftermath. I think it's an album.
Well, I mean, thanks. I feel the same way. I think it. All of the songs are different. Let's start there. I love albums that have variety,
Mhm.
so that you're not just listening to the same sound over it. And there is a place for that. Sometimes you just want that. But for me, that's kind of how, if I'm writing something, trying to access different things. But while, yes, it's about the accident and coming out of a coma and all of that, it's also about, death in the literal sense of losing my father.
Yes.
It was a very heavy head game to survive death, and then,
And then have to,
great. And the next month, someone very close to you is given a death sentence, and then you watch them deteriorate very quickly. So you're elated to be alive, you're ecstatic to be alive, but you're also the saddest and the heaviest of the bed. So that's really the scope of the record, and the whole, and accessing all of those things. And also fun things like sex, drugs, and rock and roll. You know what I mean? Like the life. You know what I mean? The whole period. Because you do a lot when you survive that.
yeah. And because I mean, even just in listening to it, I was certainly familiar with London Souls, so there's definitely some London Souls feel in it. But I was also I was getting Sly, I was getting Stevie, I was getting, Living Color.
Love Living Color.
Just all. I mean, even Mandrill, who's like one of my out of left field favorite
Shout
soul
out to
funk
Mandrill.
bands. Yeah.
Very nice reference, Mandrill. I didn't see that coming today. Mandrill.
Nobody
Wow.
ever does.
I know. Nobody else sees Mandrill coming. Yeah.
But you on this album, I mean, I think as for anybody of us who actually has been at a London Soul show or Transparent Gallery, one of the nights when you were there jamming, you are a guitar player. And I was wondering I don't normally ask people who their influences were, but it got me thinking, who did you look to? Now, you just said you love Living Color, so obviously Vernon's in there, but
Absolutely.
But who were some of the guitar players that inspired you to begin with, and inspire you to keep playing, keep getting better, and which is not to say you sound necessarily like any of them. You've been at this long enough to take the influences and mash it up in your own self, and then it becomes, oh, that's the way Tash Neal plays guitar.
It's a gumbo. It's a gumbo. Yeah. No, I mean, that's a good question, because I think it's important to differentiate, one, how you get in the guitar game, what keeps you in the guitar game, and how you how you develop that style. Because when I started playing the guitar, I didn't grow up listening to rock guitar music at all. My folks didn't have Beatles records in the house. They didn't play Zeppelin in the house. Like, they had no idea what that was. I'd seen, Black Hole Sun on MTV. I liked that video.
Mm-hmm.
I liked, In Living Color. I thought that was cool, but I didn't see myself being good at it. But my parents, who were both musicians, were like, listen, to my brother, you gotta pick something to learn. And and they were gonna tell us if we were bad. They don't play around. We're not gonna embarrass the family. So You
We're
know,
not letting you play at the family party.
at all. Not if you're not good. So, so it was always you wanted to make them proud, but I did randomly choose guitar. Um,
Really?
Neither of my parents played it. My dad kind of toyed around, but never like in front of me. I never really seen him play it. So I chose it and started classical. And I have some mistaken theory and all of that. So I kind of think of the guitar in a classical sense.
Hmm.
That's how I started. So I think of the low E string as a bass theory wise, and the top E is like a violin, which a lot of cats solo in the higher register. So it kind of does work out when you're playing the guitar in a way. But that's how I started. When I, started developing my own taste, I got 14 is when I was introduced to Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Zeppelin, Cream was huge because that married kind of the jazz
Hmm.
drumming that I
Oh,
wanted.
Ginger Baker, yeah.
Ginger Baker, same with Mitch Mitchell as well. Um, but all of that was so heavy for me. Pink Floyd, listen to CDs. The CDs were happening at the time, folks. Okay, physical things.
Yep.
So I remember my Walkman, uh, walking down with my portable CD player and listening to Dark Side of the Moon for the first time and being like, whoa, and hearing Any Color You Like and being like David Gilmour is unbelievable. This is a different style. And going home and playing 10 hours that night, trying to understand that rhythmically and where's he coming from. But all the while knowing I don't want to sound exactly like anybody. So I was very conscious of that every 10 hours playing every day, that learn this, be proficient at the style, know who their influences are, be able to play as fast or be able to play similarly, but forget it after, be able to do it, but understand that that's not you. To that point, you can have your own style and still respect and reference
Yeah.
those influences,
Yeah.
which a lot of guitarists do. And Clapton does that. But nobody ever says he doesn't sound like Clapton.
Right.
Who, again, when I was, to your point of who keeps you in the game, I got to say, as a kid growing up in New York, the Almonds at the Beacon was happening every year. So
Yeah.
I would go, this is because I didn't know anybody, you know, anywhere. So I'd be in the cheap seats, in the balcony. And I remember it was like this weird, like, who is this like teenage black kid here, like trying to listen to. And I remember trying to avoid security. This was like smoking a bowl in the corner. This is funny stuff like that. Um, but I remember thinking and watching Warren and Derek play and going, man, like, I love the guitar so much. I mean, I play it all the time. And they were approaching it with such integrity and such skill. And I knew that they listened to the same stuff that I love. But they had their own style. So I was able to see musicians that played my instrument, but doing it in a way I so respected, so looked up to, so admired. I just said, oh, this is great. This is great.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned going to see some of those, Almonds Take Over the Beacon runs. My immediate thought was, wait a minute, Derek was barely out of his teens. He might have actually been a teenager in some of the early years.
He might still be one now. He's young. He's young, folks.
He's still young. He's been doing this for 25 years. He's still young.
Sounds like he's 100 when he plays. That's the line thing, But listen, for him too, when I would watch when you're a kid and you're listening to reference the bands I mentioned, Cream, Zeppelin, there are those solos. They open up, Santana. There's a vibe where the band is building something organically live in the moment. That spiritually, I always connected to. It's the same thing with jazz. It's why it feels the way it feels. So in the context of popular music at the time, there wasn't really guitar music that had a space for that freedom. So, when I didn't even know much, I didn't really know anything about their catalog. I didn't know about Eat a Peach. I didn't know about Live at the Fillmore. I'm walking in and I am seeing and experiencing the freedom that's possible with the guitar on the stage, that people will come pay tickets to go see this in the year that I'm alive and not 1960 whatever.
Yeah.
So that was huge for me to be, oh, well, there are people today that like this style of music. So don't, give up on loving the music that you like, even though it doesn't seem to be that popular
Right.
around. But that was pretty big. And also, I mean, there's tons of other cats that, you know, kept inspiring me. I had friends that inspired me that were good musicians. When I was a teenager, me and Chris met.
Yeah.
So like that was wild. And then all of our friends were really good musicians. So we're just meeting all these great musicians that happen to love the music that I love, including Stevie Wonder, Sly Stone. I mean, we wouldn't have started a band together if we didn't love the same kind of stuff. But to bring it back to the album and from influences, this is the most myself, I feel like, where I'm able to both, on a song like All I See Is Blood, show that solo, like where I'm coming from being a teenager, finding that freedom, but also the growth of songwriting and how I want it to actually sound in the mix is very true to myself. So I think that's kind of the full circle of it, staying in the game and seeing cats like that, and then you do your own music and you get better at it, and here we are.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the difference between, Tash Neal, Charge It to the Game, and whatever, the last or next London Souls record it'll be, is that this album is you. That album is you and Chris.
Right. Exactly. That's really the main difference, and Chris plays on this record too.
Yeah, I noticed. Yeah,
Chris is involved and truly, he will always be like nobody can influence you like the person that you meet who is already a monster musician and already a killer songwriter, and that's all you're really trying to be. That's a towering influence.
Yeah,
that will always be a towering influence.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, like you have that experience with Chris. I probably have that experience with, a friend of mine from high school who, like, we would get together and trade records back and forth, and, you go over to each other's houses and play music, play records to each other. Cause I can't play instrument. And actually off the top of my head, neither could he. So that was our exchange was,
we're all trying.
check out this record.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, and I bet it happens to you too. It certainly happens to me. I don't realize that not everybody had that.
Yeah.
So like when I'm trying to pull my hair out, explaining a certain record or a certain band to somebody, I'm like, how are you not getting this? And they didn't have, like, you didn't have Chris as a teenager. I didn't have, they didn't have you or Chris
right
when they were a teenager. They didn't have me or my buddy Tom.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I do think it's also timing. I think when you are that age, there's like a hunger there, and you're so it's so cliche, but you are like a sponge. You really do build that up. Like, I still remember my first time hearing a lot of artists. It's literally, I remember the block I was on. I remember the weather that day, which is tough with brain damage, folks.
Yeah.
Okay, it's no easy feat.
I was gonna say, that's impressive.
Right? To this day, I still remember. But to your point, you have to have that connection where someone's pushing you and showing you these different things you never heard before, and you're showing them some things that maybe they haven't heard. But sometimes the best thing is when you're both hearing something for the first time, and you go, "Whoa, this is unbelievable."
Oh yeah, so some of my best nights were for about 10 years after I graduated college. One of my buddies from college was front of house at CBGB's.
Oh yeah.
So through most of the 90s, if I happened to be in the city, at the time I was working in the city, but I would just call up my buddy and be like, "Hey, can you get me on the house list tonight? There's one band I want to see." But I'd be there from like 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. and I'd see 9 bands.
I said, well, that's how you do CBG.
Yeah.
That's the only way to do that. You can't, you're not just in and out. That would be a waste.
Yeah. You gotta be there. And believe me, there were nights where I did not expect, the band after my buddies to just blow me away. And it happened more times than I can count. Um,
it's such a specific, it's another reason I love New York and smaller music scenes and when venues have this, because even when CBG was on its way out, I remember because I played there, as a teenager before it closed. And there was still an energy of like, oh, what's going to happen? And different band, still having that kind of 8 million bands a night kind of vibe. And everyone's kind of mean and get your stuff out of here. But it builds your character, whatever.
You're eating into my set time.
Yeah, right. There's a lot of aggression. Yeah, but it makes you stronger, I guess. I don't know, but something special about that,
Tash Neal is with us today on 90.5 The Night, Brookdale Public Radio. He's got a brand new album, Charge It to the Game, which is fantastic. If you want to find out more about Tash, it's tashlive.com is the place to go. And the one last thing I wanted to bring up was, I get asked by a lot of my old friends, folks who either got into radio or the music business around the same time I did. And I've been doing this now over 30 years. And they've long since left the industry. They look at my social media and all the shows I go to, and all the times I'll plug a music documentary or an album or something like that. And they're just like, how do you still have the energy to do all that? And my answer is always, the first part of my answer is, I'm not married and I don't have kids, so I can kind of do whatever I want. But the other thing is, I am always excited to find the next favorite thing. And I can now count you as one of the folks who've exposed me to my next favorite thing, because I would never have come across MJT if it weren't for you guys. And the college I went to is actually not far from where they are on Long Island.
Yeah.
Because I went to Hofstra.
Hey.
And they're in like Central Islip or something like that. Right. So it's 5 minutes away. But because they're your backing band, I saw that written somewhere, and I went and looked them up, and I'm like, these kids are amazing.
Yeah. I mean, listen, and I don't want to. I mean, they're the band, not backing band. They're the band.
They're the Tash.
They're actually the band. It's what's wild is, and let's bring it back to Danny Clinch. Shout out to Danny Clinch and Transparent Video Gallery. This one random night, and this is such a beautiful thing. It was off tour, and happened to go to a jam session at the gallery. And was like, I don't know if I can make it. It was a ferry ride and it's all this wild stuff. And I was like, you know what? I gotta go. One, and who happened to be there but Matt Godfrey from MJT, and didn't know the band, and I didn't know him yet. Now we're all family, but it's like, we became family musically first, and we kind of both looked at. I think he could tell I was like, my eyebrows were raised. I was looking, I was like, oh man, he was doing.
You were eyeing him.
He was killing it, and then I got up, and he was like, okay, and he decided to stay, because I wasn't doing too bad. So, and then we played together, and then it just was like, whoa, and it's been like that every time we played together, but. And I thought, okay, this is great, keyboard player, this is awesome. And he goes, well, listen, when I literally that night was like, we're starting a band. And he was like, okay. And so, but listen, I actually have brothers. And I said, okay, I'm about to hang out, but like, we got to start a band. Like, I didn't know if they were musicians. I was like, well, yeah, let's kick it, but great. We hang out. It's like, Jordan, you play the drums? Like, yeah. And then Dave's like, yeah, I play the guitar and the bass. And I'm like, what? And then I go to see them live, and I'm like, what? There's some, I think it was Knitting Factory in Williamsburg. And it was unbelievable. But I'd already had the experience of playing with Matt. So we're all together. I mean, immediately we all kind of clicked. And I'll never forget that first rehearsal because they dug the music and they were kind of listening out. They said, we want to play this. So we're playing Boomerang, and it was a wrap. And we got to play Radio City Music Hall together for the Easy Rider 50th anniversary.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Quite a trial by fire. You know, we played with Roger McGuinn from the Byrds, played with John Kay, you know, who was incredible. I mean, the coolest dude, and still sound. I mean, it was like literally listening to a Steppenwolf record, but you're playing it. I mean, I can't tell you the joy that I felt singing harmonies with John Kay and watching Matt, Dave, and Jordan destroying, you know, Radio City. And I was like, oh, this is just the beginning, you know. So, you know, we're just excited once this opens back up to continue to play live for folks because they're monstrous. It's explosive, you know.
Yeah, it's funny. Like after I discovered that they were your band, I went and looked them up. I found they have like 3 EPs on Bandcamp. None of them newer than like 3 years ago.
They have a great new record.
Cool.
Coming out that I got to play on. I'm excited about it, yeah.
So I grabbed those EPs, and for probably 2 days straight, I was just playing those, you know, whatever it is, 15 songs from 3 EPs.
Yeah, man.
And I'm just thinking to myself, man, I don't often wish I was still on Long Island. But I was thinking to myself, man, if I was still on Long Island, I'd go see these guys every time they played.
Listen. I think everybody should when they're on. You need to because they're missing out if they don't. Just missing talent. And the thing about them too is songwriters and instrumental. But I think why we connect so well is they're also about variety. They understand musicality, understand songs. Not only are they great musicians, but they get music. You know?
Yeah, because I think I was reading about how they started as a straight up jazz band.
They were a jazz trio.
And they are now not a jazz band.
Yeah, they just got into what's funny too, was a fun fact about us as a group and how we kind of melded. We had all this stuff in common. And then I'm like, well, so I didn't know what MJT stood for the longest time. You know, because I don't like to ask too many questions. I just respect people's space. You know, I'm like, this is cool, abbreviations.
Yeah.
Turns out it was the M was for Michael, right? And I go, well, what's that? We all have the same middle name. Yeah. Yeah, that's what that is.
What?
Yeah, both of our fathers' names were Michael, which isn't insane, but which is insane is that we all happen to have the same middle name. So that's pretty cool. So it was, you know, we're connected deeply.
That's a little spooky.
Yeah. Sometimes things are meant to be, you know?
That's right.
Yeah.
Tash Neal, Charge It to the Game is the new album, tashlive.com to find out more about Tash. And yeah, definitely once it's possible, get you and MJT back down to the Jersey Shore to play a show. Maybe a show for us. We'll see.
We are ready. Can't wait.
I think everyone is ready.
Let's go. Let's do it.
Everyone's been practicing and rehearsing at home alone, but everybody's ready to get back out there.
Everyone's prepped, primed, prepared. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. It is a pleasure to see you again. And like I said, hopefully before not too long, we can get you back down on the Jersey Shore, either for another jam session at the gallery, or a real show with full band, and we'll see what we can do. The new album, Charge It to the Game, is amazing and fantastic, and everyone should go out and buy it.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I really appreciate it, Jeff.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Good to talk to you.
Yeah.
Seeing you do us like you do, you say it's not for you. We could change it if we wanted to. I know you've heard it all before, but you open up the door to deal with what we're going through. It's all my fault. It's been like this forever, and here we are. We're supposed to live together, and all along, say it's all the same for everyone, for everyone. Something ain't right. Another day in the night. But the Father isn't here. I can hear His voice so clear. We've been doing this for years and years. If your freedoms were ignored and our wealth was never yours, we'd be playing on an equal field. But it's all my fault. It's been like this forever, and here we are, supposed to live together, and all along, you say it's all the same for everyone, for everyone. Something ain't right. Another day in the night. Oh, you're treated like a chore. Our lives matter just like yours. If you feel me, someone testify. Something ain't right. Another day in the night. Oh, you're treated like a chore. Our lives matter just like yours. If you feel me, someone testify. No, comes along, we decide what's right and wrong. Oh, I hope to one day see what it's like when we'll be free. Something ain't right. Another day in the night. Yeah. You're treated like a chore. Our lives matter just like yours. If you feel me, someone testify. Something ain't right. Another day in the night. You're treated like a chore. Our lives matter just like yours. If you feel me, someone testify. Something ain't right. Another day in the night. You're treated like a chore. Our lives matter just like yours. If you feel me, someone testify. Something ain't right. Another day in the night. Oh, you're treated like a chore. Our lives matter just like yours. If you feel me, someone testify. Something ain't right. Something ain't right. You're treated like a chore. Our lives matter just like yours. If you feel me, someone testify. Something ain't right. Something ain't right. Oh, you're treated like a chore. Our lives matter just like yours. If you feel me, someone testify. Something ain't right. Something ain't right. Something ain't right. Something ain't right.